Hi, today we're going to look at the CoolerMaster Elite 430 black computer case. This is actually the second one of these I'm going to use. I built one a couple weeks ago. I built a computer using this exact case, and now that I've had a chance to work with it and put everything in it and see how it turned out, I thought I'd do a video review of this here. I would give this case 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think it's a really good case. I did do a lot of research before I bought it, and I did find that a lot of the reviews that people left, 80% of them probably were positive, but there were probably 20% where a lot of people left negatives and a few left the same negative. And I either found when I used this case the first time that either the negative didn't apply to me, or perhaps people were doing something wrong, or using the wrong screws, which we'll look at later, or trying to yank the front of the case off, which we'll talk about later, and breaking pins or whatever that hold the front case, the front face of it on. I didn't find any of the negatives that people had listed in reviews to be either applicable, or, like I say, maybe they just were doing something wrong. So I'll address all of these that I found when I used this case the first time. A lot of my little negatives that I might point out as this video goes are my own little personal nitnoid type things that you may find to be a negative or may not find to be a negative at all. But I didn't find anything in this case that was a negative enough to make me not want to use this case again. I really think this is a really good case. So let's pull out of the box and take a look. You can get this $40 to $50 to $60 online, something like that. So obviously with the price, you're not looking at a super high-end expensive case. It is a lower-end budget case, which again we'll talk about later, and the sturdiness of it and so forth. But that's about what you can pay for this thing. Again, I love this case, didn't have any issue with it. And let's take a look at the insides here, and with it empty. And then when I'm all done with this particular build, I will do a kind of an end part of this video with all the guts in it, and you can see what it looks like after it's all built. So let's take a look at it and see what we can see. Oh, and by the way, just as a side note, I'm the only one here that's doing this, so I'm trying to point stuff out, hold a cell phone camera, and everything else. So I apologize up front if the camera gets shaky, if the light's not right, if it gets out of focus, if you got a weird view of my hand. That's just the way it's going to have to be. So please don't leave me any negative comments below of why is it so shaky, or you know, it looks like a third grader did the video. I'm doing the best I can with the two hands I got, so please be patient with me and allow for that. And enough said with that. So let's take a look at the inside of this case. Alright, so initially looking at this thing from the front, I noticed that when I built this a few weeks ago, or the one I built a few weeks ago, one of the first things I noticed about the front, and part of the reason why I bought it, is that the I/O ports are on the top center, which I really like. My computer, the one that I built a few weeks ago, sits on the floor, kind of in the center, and so the computer case is lower than of course where I'm sitting. So having the I/O ports at the top are very handy. To go along with maybe a negative is that the power on and soft boot buttons are down midway. Better design, I think, would have had them near the top or at the top, which I've seen some cases have, and put them near the I/O ports. But that's not the case, and so reaching for these two buttons may or may not be an issue for you, an inconvenience. My front of my case is pretty accessible, so I can reach down. That's not a huge deal, but would have been nicer to have those at the top, but those are down midway, I/O ports at the top. You also see that there's 3 external 5¼ inch drive bays with kind of a cool mesh looking front to them. And then you go a little further down and you've got 2 3.5 external drive bays as well, and a fairly large intake in the front. This case comes with a front mounted 120mm blue LED cooling fan, and one of the cons with this case I don't like is that's all the fans it comes with. I've seen fans, or cases rather, online that some come with 2 and sometimes even 3 fans included with the case. Well, this one only came with 1, and it's a front fan and it's a blue LED. So if you don't like lights in your fan, or you find it's going to bother you, one option if you don't want the fan in front is I bought an additional 120 millimeter non-lit fan for rear venting. And all I did when I pulled the front off this case to mount the drive bays is I removed the front fan and I moved it around to the rear, so the blue LED was rear facing, not quite as bright, and I put the no light LED in the front. So, I'm sorry, yeah, the no light LED fan in the front, so it's dark, which I really like. One other little side note from using the one that I built a few weeks ago, you can see that the power light and the hard drive activity light are here in the front. And that standby power light, the one on top here, that's really bright. When the computer is in standby mode and that thing blinks, it is bright. So if you are in a place where it's in a dark room or something, you might be trying to sleep, that thing can be really annoying. My computer's in a separate room, so I don't have that issue, but nothing that a little black piece of tape maybe or a little something over that light won't fix. Again, I don't find that a deterrent at all as far as not wanting to buy this case. So just be aware that that blue the blue power light's pretty bright. I did run the case a little while with the front fan with a blue before I switched it to the back, and actually I didn't really notice it wasn't all that super bright. It wasn't that much of a distraction, but I did prefer to move it around to the back, so that's what I did. So that's the front, pretty standard there. Move around to the side here. You can see one of the coolest features with this is this big side window. Now of course that's going to make, if you're not very neat and tidy running cables, that's going to force you to be neat and tidy to run cables, so you don't have a messy looking internal computer case when you've got the ability to see inside of it. So anyway, that's a really cool feature I found. Again, one of the main reasons why I bought this case. And it also has the provision to mount another 120 millimeter. I think it's 120. I'd have to look at the specs, but anyway, another fan on the side if you needed more venting. So that's the front and the side. Let's spin it around and take a look at the back and the top. Alright, here's the top of the case. As you can see, room for yet 2 more fans if you really need that much cooling. One of the things that I found to be a possible concern or a possible negative about this case, and this is all dependent on how you build yours, but once you get the motherboard in and all your components in, the motherboard's pretty close to the top of the case in this and these 2 fans here. So you may need to get, if you're going to get a top fan, is a slim design type fan. I'm not sure if a thick fan, a standard thicker fan will do, but I do know, because I researched online, they do make slimline, fans for the top. So that might be one thing you might want to keep in mind, is you might need a thinner fan for the top. But otherwise, again, more great cooling here for this case. The back, there's your port for your rear exhaust fan. It will hold an 80, a 92, and a 120. Hence the 3 different positions of the holes here. I got, again, I moved that 120 from the front around to the back, so I've got that working for me. You've got 2 inlets there for if you are a heavy gamer or you need water cooling or some other kind of cooling. You've got two intake, or an input and an output for liquid cooling if you want. Here's where the I/O shield goes. 7 expansion slots and a bottom mounted power supply, and that is pretty much the back. Alright, looking at the bottom here, again, this is a bottom mounted power supply, so you have room on the bottom for another fan. So you've got the front fan, the rear fan, 2 top fans, the side fan on the see-through window, and a bottom fan. So you've got plenty of cooling in this thing if you need. But you also have a bottom-mounted power supply. So there's the power supply intake, and it has this little screen on it here which you can pull off. And that's a nice little handy thing, because when it gets dusty, you can take that out, remove it, and clear the dust out of it and put it back in to cover the power supply. One of the things I don't like about this case, a con, is that in order to get it in, you have to flip, you have to get it in all the little clips there, all the little brackets. I have seen some fans where the edges of this filter are rigid and they slide in. It just rides along some tracks, and you just slide it in, slide it out, slide it in, slide it out, and it's nice and easy to get to. If you clean your filter on a regular basis, you'll be needing, as far as I can see, you'll be needing to basically disconnect everything from the back of the computer, turn this thing on its side like it is in order to get to this, clear it out, and then tuck all the little edges around here to get this thing back in. I just don't see a way to do that if the case is standing up. So not very user friendly in that respect, but I guess it'll do. So also, another thing to keep in mind, if you're not built a computer before or relatively inexperienced, is with this bottom mounted power supply, granted it's got the legs on it here, but in my opinion, you might read something different or you might have a different opinion, but you don't want to put this computer on a carpet, whether it's a carpet with no pile in it at all, or fluffy carpet, whatever. These feet on the carpet will not only, if the carpet's high enough, it'll block this intake, but over time, with the carpet being soft, these feet will eventually sink down into the carpet a little bit, and it could restrict airflow. So in my opinion, the best place for a computer like this with a bottom mounted power supply is on a hard, flat surface to keep as much air as possible being able to be drawn in. I've actually even read online where some people even block the feet up, make it a little bit higher off the ground to get sufficient airflow to the power supply. So just keep that in mind. Otherwise, a pretty basic bottom to this thing, again with the negative of the filter there for the power supply intake. And one thing I did not point out along the back that I wanted to is CoolerMaster touts this thing as being a toolless design, so you don't really need tools to put anything in if you've got the normal number of drive bays and so forth. And one of the nice things I like about this case is it has these toolless thumb screws. If you need to, you can, that's how you remove these two to take the sides off. So they're just a nice little toolless design. They do have, on the head of them, they do have the Phillips head slot in them. So if you need to use a screwdriver to either tighten them in if you want, or loosen them up, you have the ability to do that. So anyway, so thumbless or thumb screws on the rear. One of the things I had read online is people had said that they had stripped those out. They weren't done very well. They're crappy quality. Well, you just got to put them in, take your time when you're putting them in, and I didn't find any issue with putting them in at all. And when I did my first build, I had the sides off and on 10, 12 times and never had a problem with those thumb screws getting stripped or not going in or going in crooked. So if you just take your time, you should have no problem. This one's on really kind of tight. I can't get it off. But anyway, so 4 thumb screws on the back for easy access in order to remove these side panels. Alright, so I was able to, I actually had to use a screwdriver to get this bottom thumb screw out of here because it was in pretty tight. I just needed it to crack it a little bit. But I've taken the 2 thumb screws off there so we can pull this side off. Now, one of the things that I also like to point out at this time is that when you pull the side off of this, it's going to be kind of thin. It's pretty thin metal, and that was one of the negatives that I had read that a lot of people had said, that this thing is a thin case. It's flimsy. It's cheap. It's not built well because of this thin metal. Well, you know what? Quite honestly, this is not a super high-end case. This is a budget case. It's not $150. It's $50. So you're not going to find a super heavy, super sturdy case. Now, if you're not manhandling it or putting it under your car to support it while you're working on it, I don't really find that necessary. I don't need to have a case that an elephant can stand on. So I don't find that negative at all. As a matter of fact, again, it keeps the weight down and it keeps the cost down of this case. So yeah, it's going to be a little thinner, but that's the way it is. So when you remove this side, don't be surprised if it feels a little thin. So anyway, so now with the thumb screws off, you just grab up underneath this little lip and you just slide the side off, and that's all there is. And again, people have had an issue with getting these sides off and on. I don't find that to be the case. So we'll just set that down for now. So here's the inside. Let's go ahead and stand this thing up and take a look at it. So again, going with the theory that CoolerMaster's gone with a toolless design, you'll see that there's a spot in two of the 5 1/4 inch drive bays where you have a nice easy design, and all you need to do when you mount any drives is you move that little tab, and that pulls the if you feel back here, which you can't see, but there's little things that stick out, little pins that stick out, and I can feel it, and when I unlock it, those pins go away. So you can just slide the drive in, and when you get it in the right spot, you just lock it down, pins re-engage, and now your optical drives are being held in. If you take the other side off here, of course you can get to this the other side of this the other side of the case, and you'll see that there's screw holes, places to put screws in. If you're anal like me and you want to actually lock down your drives with screws as well on the other side, you can do that. But if you don't, if you just are happy with the automatic locking little mechanism there, then you're good. It's got 2 there, it's got 2 down here, and then I'm assuming that's perhaps for a solid state drive that I don't have, I've never used, so I don't know if that's what it's for. But again, those are easily, you just take them off and you slide your hard drive in and you lock it back down, and now you're in place. Again, no tools, hence the toolless design. There is one thing I did say you won't need tools to do. Obviously you'll need tools to screw in the motherboard with the motherboard screws in the standoff. So that's about the only thing you'll need a tool for. A screwdriver is for that. So anyway, that's the toolless design. There's the front LED 120mm fan. Here is all the hardware that they give you for it, and I'll give you a little side note about the hardware here in a little bit, if I can get this out of here. Something to keep in mind when you dig into that bag. Here is the connector for the front fan. It's a 3-pin fan with a 4-pin Molex adapter. If you want to plug it directly into the power supply, you can do that. Now, another con or another negative with this fan that I rectified with $3 is this main fan cable here is kind of short, and I like to plug my fans into the motherboard. You can plug up to 3, I think, in the motherboard I have, to monitor. And so my fan plugs in my Asus motherboard, when it was done, one is clear up at the top and one is clear over here in the back. Well, this main cable is not long enough to reach those. It came up short, so I had to go down and spend $3, and I got a 12-inch extension, a 3-pin to 3-pin extension, and now I can run this fan directly to one of the 2 spots on my motherboard where the power supply, or where the pins were, the 3 pins were. So anyway, something to keep in mind if you don't care about monitoring, and if you want just your fan to run balls to the walls all the time at max RPM, then you can just use the Molex and plug it in directly to the power supply. So anyway, so there's the fan and its plug. And then of course all the I/O cables and the I/O inputs in the front, the power button, the soft boot button, all the lights in the front. There's your big wire harness for all those. And actually, I see I misspoke. These are just for the power button, soft boot button, and the hard drive and power lights. Your input-output, are up top here. Your USB 2 plug to the motherboard and also the audio plug to the motherboard are all up top there. So There's those, and your power and light buttons down below. And the rest of it we've already gone through. Bottom fan, power supply intake. One of the nice things about this is if you look at the top, where the top fans are located, you'll see that similar with the power supply in the bottom, there is a mesh on here. So again, if they get dusty, you just need to slide the this mesh out of there and clean it. So that's kind of nice too. They give you a lot of ways to keep dust out of this thing for all the air you're going to suck through it potentially. So anyway, so that is the interior. Pretty roomy, and this is what I was talking about earlier, whereas if you put your motherboard in, your motherboard is going to go pretty close to the top, and this fan intake is going to be right near the top of the motherboard. So you can see the top motherboard screw and the top of the case, not a lot of distance. So again, for these top fans, you may need a slim design fan to make sure there's enough room to get that fan in there. The other potential problem with fans is on this bottom fan. When the power supply is in, and on the CoolerMaster power supply that I bought, the power cables exit the power supply in this lower corner over here and come back. Well, if you run all your cables and stuff out this power supply and over the top of this fan intake area, you may have an issue with power or cable management and this fan, how to negotiate unless you just run it over the top. So I have my cables, which we'll see when the build is complete. I can squish my cables along the back here, and I hide them in this back compartment here. And I'm pretty sure I could probably get a fan here, certainly an 80 or a 92. A 120 might be a little bit big, so that might be a potential issue of the bottom fan, is making sure there's enough space and room to work with the power supply wires that come out of there. So one potential fix for that I read online is you can get a modular power supply and only have the cables plugged in that you actually need to power everything. So anyway, so that's one possible problem, but I don't have that problem because I have no bottom, nor do I have a top mounted fan. So there's the inside. Again, pretty roomy, toolless design, top bays, plenty of bay space. I mean, one of the cons that I wish is that each one of these had a toolless design. I'm not sure if I said that earlier, so sorry if I'm repeating myself, but it would be nice if every single bay had the toolless design, but again, that would just probably increase cost. So I just have one optical drive on mine, and I have one hard drive, so I've got plenty of toolless design for me. So anyway, so that's the inside. Let's look at the hardware here really quick, and there's one thing about removing this front case I also want to go over, but let's take a look at the hardware they give you with this thing. Alright, so here's the hardware that's included in this, and they give you quite a bit. First of all is this bag of screws, and there are a boatload of screws in here. And you notice that they're all black because the interior of the case is all black, so it's nice that they don't give you silver screws. So tons of screws for different hardware mounting. And also in a separate baggie there's 4, if you can see them there, 4 power supply screws that they give you, and so when you screw it into the back, your power supply screws can be black as well, so you can swap out the silver ones that come with the power supply, which I thought was kind of neat. The only silver you'll have on this thing visible once you get it all done is the I/O shield that comes with the motherboard, but other than that, I thought that was kind of a neat thing for black power supply screws. The motherboard speaker, cable ties, which I thought was nice. We'll talk about cable management with this thing, but cable management is not all that good, but they at least give you some ties to help you with that. And finally, this little locking thing here. You can take the lock, of course it goes on the inside, and goes in that slot right there in that screw hole, and then you can just put in this, and you take one of the screws that it's supplied with, and then you have your little locking loop around the outside if you choose to lock your side on so nobody can tamper with your goods. I'm not that worried about it. So that's the hardware that comes with it. A couple things to note with this, which I thought was really cool. I've never had a CoolerMaster case. They give you this really cool socket. I've never seen this before, so some of you might go, yeah, you always get that. Okay, I've never seen this before. But on the top of it is the standard Phillips head screw. And then the bottom of it, if you can see from the flash here, is meant to fit the motherboard standoffs. So instead of just screwing these in finger tight and hope you can get them in, you can screw them in finger tight and then use the little socket there and tighten them in with the socket and a screwdriver once you're done. So I thought that was kind of neat. I also read where people were complaining that they were stripping these screws out, putting them into the holes in the case. I never had that problem with these standoffs, so I don't know what people were worried about, but I thought they went in fine. The other place that I had read the most common problem with this hardware is that people were saying that they were stripping the motherboard screws that go into these standoffs. They were stripping them out. Well, let me point something out here really quick. There are 3 different kinds of screws in this thing. One of them is really easy to decipher because it's got the round head and it stands different than the rest. That is for the hard drive screws down in this lower bay area, and easy to tell. And then there's a whole bunch of these screws that look like this with the little flange on them that are meant for motherboard standoffs, hardware, other types of hardware mounting. Well, there are 2 different threaded screws that look exactly the same. And here's the 2 different kinds. And you'll notice that they look exactly the same. I'm not doing it justice here, but they have the same top, but they are different threads. And so I think people were having a problem screwing them into the standoffs and stripping them out. So you can't tell, again, with this cell phone camera, but there's a fine threaded screw and a little coarser threaded screw, which you can't see from this, I realize. What I ended up doing was I took every single one of these screws that look the same, because my eyes aren't that good to see the threads on them. And I took every screw and I tried to screw it into this motherboard standoff. And if it screwed in, I set it in one pile. If it didn't screw in, I set it into another pile. And so that's how you can separate the 2 different kinds of screws here from each other. I guess maybe one's actually even a little bit bigger. So I guess you could tell that way too. But just be careful that you separate the screws and use the correct screw in the motherboard standoff and don't strip them out. So that is the hardware that you get with this thing. Pretty extensive, pretty good. And again, separate your 2 different screws into 2 different piles and you'll have no problem using the right screw for the right task. Alright, before I put all the guts in this thing, we're just about done with the empty part of this. Just to go over one more item before we're done with this, and that is in regard to this front panel. I read a lot of reviews online before I bought this thing, and specifically with the negative reviews. Almost every single one of the negative reviews had said how difficult it is to get this front panel off, because if you're going to put in drive bays, you'll need to pull this front panel off, pop these panels out here in order to slide the bay in. You can do it from the back, put it in, that's fine, but you still need to pop this front off to take off this meshed plate that's on the front here in order to get the drive, accessible, the front of the drive accessible. And what people were doing on the underside of this, as you can probably guess, is there's a place, a handhold right there, to reach in and grab underneath and yank this thing off. Well, that's the problem that you run into, is people were yanking this plate off, this front cover, and I had read one where the guy had basically ripped off, the plastic had broke down around here because he'd pulled so hard that he had cracked or broke this front part off here. There's little pins in there, which I'll show you in a second, that 3 along each side that hold that front plate in, front cover. A lot of people were complaining that they were breaking those plastic pins off by yanking this thing out. Okay, if you want to be in a hurry and yank the face off, do it at your own risk. But there's an easy way to do it without breaking anything, without muscling it. You cannot, in my opinion, you cannot rip or pull or yank this front cover off. You have to do it careful and use a little finesse, and you can get the job done. So basically what you'll need in order to pull this front cover off correctly is, it's really helpful to have a pair of needle nose pliers handy. And what you're going to do once you get the sides off is you go around the back side here, and you can see right here, there's one of the plastic pins, there's the second plastic pin, and there's the third plastic pin. And you notice that they're flanged or flared, so the pin is bigger than the hole, and when you push it through, of course, the pin collapses down and slides through the hole. Well, if you want to do this right, without breaking anything, all you got to do is just take your needle nose, and you get in there, and you can just pinch this thing down a little bit, and see, it'll pinch down, and then you just carefully push out the plate a little bit until it pops free. Now, I only have 2 hands. I'm trying to hold my phone in one hand, the pliers in the other, and so I don't have a third hand to actually take this front off. But basically, you just start at the top, and once you get the front corner off, matter of fact, you can see I'm just pinching it here, and you can see it starting to separate right away. And then all you have to do is just push that thing out. I don't know if I can. Nope, I can't. I don't have enough hands. But basically, you just pinch this pin, and then once you get this separated, this corner separated, hold it out, hold it, keep it from closing in on itself, move down to the middle pin, pop that one out, and then once you get those 2 out, then the third one down here will come out relatively easily, and now that whole side will swing away. And then all you have to do is you'll have to remove this other side with the thumb screws. You'll have to take this side panel off, and you'll see the 3 pins, 1, 2, 3, and once you get those 3 pins off, just by squeezing them again, that whole front cover will come off really easily, and then you'll be able to get this side panel off. Not rocket science. So that's the only thing you want to really be careful about is muscling this front off. So let me see if I can get this front off and show you behind this front panel. Alright, you can see that I've removed the other side, because now right to the CPU, extra CPU cooling area here, it's empty. And I popped that front plate off, and you can see now from this side, you can see a better shot of those 3 pins. 1, 2, 3 that fit in there. 3, that hole right there, and that one, and that one. I just pinch those, out pop the front, and then once you get it away, just be careful you don't pull too hard, because you have these upper I/O wires that are here. So, but once you separate the wires here, if I can get it, now the whole front panel is easily movable to install the base. Now you'll have to break out these metal covers here if you want to put in any drive bays. Those are easy to break loose. And then on the back side here, in order to get these front plates off, you'll see that right here there's 2 clips, one there, one there. And all you need to do is just pull those to the side carefully. And then, well, again, I'm out of hands because you need to push them from the front. So you just squeeze these two tabs. Let me run around over here really quick and push. And you can see that that just popped out. And now you can remove the plate. And again, people were complaining online that these were hard to remove and they were breaking these little tabs here, or breaking these little edges here where the tab clips to, because they were trying to pry these things out. You just got to pull these little tabs here to the side and push from the front, and out it will pop. So this computer that I'm building, I've got two of these drive bays here that I need to use. So I'll be taking out this other side, or this other plate, and popping out the metal plates here, 1 and 2, and that'll get me to the drive bays. And just as a side note here, one last thing as this side's off for cable management. Once you get the motherboard up here, there's not a lot of room to stuff cables, I've found, in this thing. There's not a lot of room behind this plate because the gap between the side panel and this plate is pretty small. The only place I found to really stuff wires, and they were power supply wires, is from the power supply, which would be here. Power supply cables come out this corner, and then they get stuck, jammed in this area in here on this side of the case here, and all mashed up into this one little area and kind of behind this deal here. So that's what keeps them out of view. So not the best in cable management. And you'll notice too that while I'm here, there's no toolless hardware on this side at all. This side's got the toolless hardware, but for the 5 1/4 bays, nothing. So you've got the spots, of course, to put in your screws, your black supplied screws that came with it if you want to screw in the other side of your hardware. So that's the other side taken off. So that basically is the case as it stands empty, with the front off. And then once I get this thing all put together, we'll look at it when it's all done, and you can see what the end result looks like. That's the Elite CoolerMaster, or CoolerMaster Elite 430. Alright, so as promised, here is the final product of this build here. Everything's all in and hooked up, the computer works. So as promised, I thought I'd just run through the final product and you could see what it looked like on the inside with all the wires and all the cable management and everything put into place. First of all, just let me start at the front panel here. Of course, the front built-in I/O panel, which we've already talked about, installed as an ASUS DVD burner that fits nicely, of course, and then down below is a tray with 2 USB 3 plugs in it. Just really quick about the rationale of why I did it that way. Of course, they do make cases where the input-output has USB 3 plugs on the front. My particular motherboard, my ASUS motherboard, only has one USB 3 head on the motherboard. It's got 3 USB 2 connectors. So if I would have bought a case with USB 3 plugs in it, I would have been able to use just my only USB 3 head on the motherboard, and I would have wasted those 3 USB 2 pins. So I would have essentially limited myself, unless I would have done the same thing here except made this tray a USB 2 type of a situation. But if I'd have just done stock USB 3 inputs on the front, I would have shorted myself 2 USB inputs on the front. So I made use of one of the 3 USB 2 heads on the motherboard, and I made use of the only USB 3 head on the motherboard. So that's given me obviously 4 USB inputs on the front. So that's why I didn't go with just a case with just straight USB 3, because then I would have only had 2 built in. So anyway, so that's the front. And they do make this, incidentally, if you're interested, if you go on eBay and search for this, they do make this USB 3 panel in the 3.5, but I figured I've got 3 front 5 1/4 drives and only 2 of these in case somebody wanted to put a floppy in here or a card reader or something. I'm short myself. I'd only have one more panel left, so I still have room, of course, for one more 5.5 drive, or 5.25 drive up there. So anyway, that's my rationale for that. So that's the front side. Pardon my camera work here. Looking at the interior of this is what it looks like with all the components in. It's about as clean as I can get it. I might tweak it just a little bit and see if I can rerun wires any better. But basically, starting from the back, as I said I would probably do, I've added a second 120 millimeter case fan for exhaust, an Arctic fan. And there's the motherboard in place. It's an Asus P8Z. It's right there. Oops, glare, sorry. P8Z 77 VLX with an Intel i5 3570 processor and 2 sticks of Kingston HyperX, 2 gigabytes apiece, so 4 gigs of RAM. The CPU plug has been routed and zip tied to the back. It's done to the fan, and it runs right straight across the 7 expansion slots. So if this computer that my friend has ever needs an expansion slot taken, I'm going to have to rerun that wire. But for now, there's no plans for that. I suppose I could run it along the side and then underneath the fan here and then up and plug it in. But for now, that'll work. This is the wire, the extension that I said I would get for the front fan. It's the 3-pin to 3-pin extension. So here's the 1-foot extension, and then you can see where it plugs into the front fan here and then runs into the front to the fan, of course. So that has to run, as far as I can see, right straight across. I can't do anything else with that. Again, I can tweak it, I guess, later and find out. The CoolerMaster 500 watt power supply. And one of my concerns, if you recall, was being able to fit a bottom fan in here and having enough room with the wires coming out of the power supply. Well, with everything all crammed against the back, I think I could probably fit a bottom fan in here if I wanted to. Certainly an 80 and a 92 fan would work, but 120, that would probably work as well. But again, for me, not needing a bottom fan, I don't have to worry about it. I also expressed concern with using a top fan and the amount of room you have between the top intake and the top of the motherboard here. Not a lot of room. This is the connector for the this Arctic fan, runs along the top and then plugs into the header here, and then of course the CPU fan plugs in here. So some stuff going on up here, but it looks like you can fit a 120 millimeter fan on these two top if you needed to. There appears to be room between the top of the RAM slots here and the top of the case to fit a fan in. Again, I would maybe suggest a slim fan if you can find one, but it looks like maybe a standard fan would fit, but not a lot of room. This area here, this is the back of the optical drive, the back of the USB 3 tray. There's a lot of stuff going on right in here for wires and cables. Again, I'm not really impressed with the cable management of this thing, but this is probably the best I can do. I can tweak with it later, again, to see if I can get it better. But for now, there's a lot of stuff zip tied together here. The 24-pin power supply, the USB 3 plug, my SATA cable from the DVD drive, the power supply to the DVD drive, the extension is zip tied to this. There's a lot of stuff going on right in here. Also, the cables that come from the front I/O port here, that are the audio and the USB 2 plug, are all zip tied right in here too. So a lot of stuff, but it looks neat. I think you might have a different opinion, but that's about as neat as I can get it. The Western Digital 1 gigabyte drive is down here, and its connector, its SATA plug to the motherboard, everything is all kind of jammed along the back here as well. So that's about as good from the power supply as I can get. Of course, the front fan is in place there, which probably will not be swapping that to the back like I did with my personal build of a similar build that I did with this. So anyway, so there is this side and how it all looks. Of course, from the transparent window, you're going to be able to see all of this here, all of this area. So I've tried to make it as neat as I could. Again, maybe I could do more, but for now, this is the way it's going to have to be. So let's take a look at the back side of this case before I put the side on, and you can see where all of this stuff jams into the corner down here. We'll take a look at that, and you can see how that all fits. But that is the case from the main side here and how it all looks. Alright, the last portion of this video, looking at the case from the back side. Of course, you have the cutout for, I believe that's for additional CPU cooling. Not an issue for me, but here's the top trays here. I did elect to use the two of the supplied black screws from the power supply, or from the case, to secure in the DVD drive. One additional screw into the tray for the USB 3, and then the toolless design down here. Actually, no, what I did is I left the toolless design and I added two screws into the hard drive down here. So everything's all secure, and then of course here's the back, this back lower corner where all of this stuff comes together. Of course, the obvious power supply wires down in here, and then all these are for the soft reset, the power on, and the hard drive activity, and the power light that all go to the motherboard that are also all jammed back in here. Here's the fan cable going to the fan, and I have to figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of this. I don't have a lot of room to pull on this extra, so this just may have to be the way it is. So again, not the best cable management. There's not really much to do with the cables around the back side of the tray here, so really everything has to be crammed into this lower corner. But of course, once the side gets on, you won't obviously see that from this side, and this is all pretty much hidden from that window on the other side. So that is the final product of this case and how everything all fits together. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. Hope it was informative. Hope it helped you out. Feel free to leave a comment if you think anything else can be done different. But anyway, that's it for this case. Thanks a lot and enjoy.